Warhammer painting YouTubers always edit out their mistakes because we're a bunch of narcissists who are trying to deceive you into thinking that we are infallible painting gods, right? Well, actually, maybe a little bit. But no, the main reason that we don't show our screw-ups on camera is that they're just not that interesting. 95% of the time, the answer to how do I fix this mistake is just paint over it. And that would make for a pretty boring video. It's usually much more interesting to try and teach you the fundamental skills that'll help you avoid making mistakes in the first place. But today I have something special for you. A series of choices so stupid that they caused my painting project for this video to crash and burn entirely. So sit back, relax, and join me on this saga of failure and redemption. My intention was to do something for Orktober this year, so I went searching through my bag of goodies that I got at Adepticon. The first thing I found was this sample pack for Kings of War. The assembly instructions called these guys Ogre Warriors, but they look plenty orky to me. I was actually really curious to see what the quality of these models would be like, since I almost always paint Warhammer minis and GW has a reputation for stellar quality. At first glance, they looked pretty well detailed, but you'll see later that there are a few design faults that did me no favors during the painting process. Overall, assembly was pretty straightforward. Every model is just 4 parts, a body, a set of arms, and a head. So this is mistake number 1. I chose these models just because I had them on hand and I was kind of mildly interested in seeing what they had to offer. But I should have known better. I know that I love to sit with single models for extended periods of time and really sink my teeth into them. But that's not really going to be possible if I have a unit of 3, especially not if I'm trying to paint them quickly for a video. Which leaves me with only one option: speed painting, a genre that I am not overly fond of. But hey, getting outside of your comfort zone's a good thing, right? This ended up being mistake number 2 from me, but please don't interpret this as me discouraging you from taking risks. They will often work out in your favor. Just not this time, not for me. I wanted to try out the universal shadow color route. Basically, every part of the model would have the same shade of purple as its shadow color. It's a fun idea that I've seen a few other people do before, and it's the perfect setup for a topic I've had on my video ideas list for some time. What makes a color? How far can you vary the shadow and highlight tones across a surface and still have it be recognizable as a single color? For a while, my approach was working. I went about quickly layering the green orc skin over the purple and then highlighting up that skin into a nice sunny yellow. Just as a quick aside, having a central question or narrative is how I and a lot of other YouTubers like to structure our videos. This is another reason that we tend to edit out mistakes, because they can distract from the main point of the video or disrupt the flow of the script. Kind of like what I'm doing right now. Imagine if I had to pause the video like this every time I made an errant brushstroke. Anyway, let's get back to the painting. At this point, I'm starting to think that the orc skin is looking pretty good. So what went wrong? Big mistake number 3 was not having a well thought out plan. I simply had not taken as close a look at the models as I should have. In my head, I was imagining these models having a lot more skin and clothing than they actually did. Both of those surfaces would lend themselves really well to the style of painting that I was attempting. Back in reality, these guys are actually like 80% leather and armor. And here is where my mistakes really started to snowball. Because these were models I was only tepidly interested in, I hadn't inspected them closely enough to get a sense of their composition. Because I knew I was going to have to paint fast, I decided I would cut corners by just doing a dry brush heavy version of my leather recipe, which naturally results in less contrast. And then I thought, oh, let's just make things even easier and do the armor plates as simple as can be, just a steel-colored metallic with an Agrax Earthshade wash. Lots of snap decisions, relying on habit, no plan, and guess what? Now I've completely lost track of the original painting method I was trying to explore. I apologize if I was starting to sound a little bit insane there, but frankly, that is how I was feeling at this point in the process. Take a look at these models. They are utterly monotonous to look at. Simultaneously too busy, but also completely undifferentiated. My eyes just do not know where to go and are having a hell of a time figuring out where the leather starts and the metal ends. Why did I not let the purple shadow color come through more on the leather? Why did I choose to shade the metal in a brown wash, virtually guaranteeing it would blend with the leather? Why couldn't I have chosen literally any other color of leather to paint? I don't know, but I am starting to burn out here. And to make matters worse, the design of these guys has been fighting me the whole way through. I apologize to any Kings of War fans, but this experience had me so frustrated that I need to just rant a little bit right now. These sculpts suffer from a kind of over-design that I see all too often in fantasy. I'm gonna call it the World of Warcraft problem, where proportions are over-exaggerated on all the armor and weapons, and there's just too many details per element. Prime example, this shoulder armor. It has segmentation, spikes, trim, and a vertical plate. 4 different bits of decorative design on one piece of armor. That needs to be scaled back to 2 max, preferably 1 to be honest. It makes it a nightmare to paint when you have so many subdivided surface across all elements of the model. And because of the over-design issue, it made it all the more harder to differentiate between surfaces. There were so many places where the metal and the leather just seemed to blend into each other. I was now fully realizing just how daunting finishing the rest of these guys was gonna be. And on top of that, I was just really unhappy with how they were coming out. So now the question is, what do I do about it? I could try just powering through and seeing if I could save the paint job by making bold choices for the remaining unpainted bits. That would probably be the easiest option, and sometimes just taking it in stride is the best way to deal with a conceptual error like this. I could also try darkening the armor with a black ink, therefore increasing the contrast and visibility. But both of those solutions don't address the fact that now most of the paint job on these models has nothing to do with my intended video topic. To solve that problem, I could just paint over all of the armor and leather in my purple base coat again and start from scratch. That would let me both fix my color issues and re-execute the paint job in a way that was conducive to my lesson. But in the end, I just listened to my feelings. I was not having fun painting anymore. And if you're not having fun painting, why are you even doing it? Not to mention, if I half-assed the rest of the paint job just to push them over the finish line, I know that the video quality is going to end up suffering because of that. And frankly, I don't want to waste your time on a shitty video. So I quit and I put them on the shelf. And I'm not gonna lie, it had me feeling pretty down for the next couple of days. I have never screwed up so bad that I had to just abandon a project altogether. And it felt like such a waste of time that I'm not even gonna have any finished models done for the video. But then, I remembered.
No, there is another.
I actually have another orc model in my bag from Adepticon, and by Gork and Mork, look at how cool this guy is. Just like that, my enthusiasm is back. Sometimes model choice can make all the difference. Now, I'm gonna mostly paint this guy off camera because this one is for me. I just really need to make myself feel better. But I can't completely leave you hanging, so I will show you how I went about painting the orc's skin. We'll be starting off with a purple base coat again. On the previous models, I was just using Nagaroth Night, but I feel like that was a little too dark and a little too cold, so this time we're going to be mixing in one of my favorite paints, Vallejo Violet Red. This is going to add some much needed warmth and life to the base coat. I use this color on human skin tones all the time. Once that's all dry, I'm going to take even more of that violet red, thin it down, and push it into a few different places across the face. The nose, the cheeks, the ears, anywhere where you would expect there to be more blood vessels. Next, we can come in and start laying down some green. This is Vallejo Black Green, and I'm going to be very generous with it. We only really need to leave the purple showing in the absolute deepest shadows. For our next step, I'm using Pro Acryl Dark Yellow Green. And what I'm doing here is sort of trying to create a map of which parts of the face are actually going to be fully illuminated and which parts are going to remain in shadow. It's okay to be pretty rough and blocky with the application at this point. Like I said, we're just kind of creating a map. Now, once you have your illuminated areas and your shadow areas defined across the face, we can begin doing our highlighting. And we can kind of consider our light and our dark areas to be their own little separate world. Our brightest highlight in the shaded areas is going to be very close to the lowest shadow in the bright areas. But our deepest shadows on the dark side are going to go all the way down to that purple mix, and our brightest highlights on the light side are going to go up into a very lively yellow. Since we already did a bit of building up from our darkest shadow color, most of the work that's left to do is going to be on the light side. So I'm going to spend some time layering up by mixing Vallejo Sand Yellow with that dark yellow green. And I'm going to be doing about 2 to 3 layers of these highlights, letting the shapes of the face determine my placement. How many layers you need to do is going to be determined by how much contrast you want. I want this guy to be looking like he's standing in some bright sunlight, so I'm gonna go pretty bright with my top end highlights. One little piece of advice for all of you painters who are still learning out there is try experimenting with more contrast. Sometimes just achieving a higher contrast ratio is the thing that's going to take your painting to the next level. Though do be careful, there is such a thing as too much contrast. You can see here I'm actually going into the ridges on his upper lip to bring up that shadow color a little bit, going from my highest highlight color all the way down to the purple that was still showing in there was a bit too much. The final step is going to be blending all of our layers. For this, we're going to be working with glaze consistency. If you don't quite know what that means, or you're not super confident with your paint consistencies, go check out my previous video on paint control. I have always found that it is much easier to glaze using a darker color. So you can see here on the back of the head, I'm using some more of that Vallejo Black Green, thinned way down to just gently start erasing those harsh edges between the different color steps. For the blending on the illuminated side of the face, I'm actually introducing a new color here. This is Pro Acryl Bright Yellow Green. I often find that on the first pass of highlighting up and mapping out your gradients, there's just not quite enough vibrance there. But this bright yellow green is practically neon. Just watch how much life it brings to the skin. And that's it. You can spend as much or as little time as you want doing the blending. If you want a more painterly look, you may not do any blending at all. All right, conclusion time. What have we learned? First of all, Don't waste time painting models that you're not excited about. And this is true whether you're painting single miniatures for display or if you're planning on fielding an army on the battlefield. Secondly, have a plan. This is probably the best way to avoid big mistakes. An errant brushstroke or two are easy to just paint over, but a color scheme that just does not work, well, now you're talking about stripping the models and starting from scratch. This planning can take many forms: closing your eyes and visualizing, using an existing color scheme, using a color picker app like ImpCat, or painting a bunch of test models. And finally, if you are working on a project that is causing you to tear your hair out, just put it down, clear your mind, and think about maybe painting something else for a while. Then, if you are so inclined, you can pick up that old project again. Or maybe you won't. Am I going to revisit my ugly little ogre warriors in the future? Maybe, maybe not. Perhaps they deserve some form of redemption too. Let me know if you'd like to see that down in the comments. If I do end up redoing them, it'll probably be a full repaint. So, was all that more interesting than if I had just gotten to finish my original topic as I intended? I don't know. That's for you to decide. In any case, that's it for today, everyone. And oh wait, I'm forgetting something, aren't I? I know you love a model showcase, and I love a model showcase too. Roll the clip. Thank you everyone for watching. If you're interested in supporting what I do here on the channel, please consider joining my Patreon, where I will be posting some additional footage of how I painted the orc's leather jacket and shades. You can also get behind the scenes updates, community polls, additional tutorials, and even personalized painting instruction. But perhaps most importantly, you get access to my Discord server, where we are building a community of painting enthusiasts who want to learn from each other. Last but not least, I want to give a huge shout out to my current patrons. You are making all of this possible. Thanks again, everyone, and until next time, I'll see you on the tabletop.